So, my phone buzzed at 11:40 on a Tuesday night. I was already down for the count. I'm up normally at 4:45, so 11:40 is the middle of the night for me. It was a founder I'd been working with, property tech company, Series B, board meeting Thursday morning. The text said, "Can you look at the pipeline before I present this and tell me if I'm about to embarrass myself?" That's a hard text to send, and I've got to give the man credit for sending it. So I pulled it up first thing the next morning. 41 open opportunities, 4.3 million weighted pipeline. And honestly, it looked fine. It looked pretty healthy. Then I sorted by close date. 34 of the 41 closed on the last day of the quarter. Same date, every one of them. Now, nobody did that on purpose. Nobody sat down and decided to mislead the board. What happened is that 34 separate times a seller opened a record, hit a required field, and picked the value that made the field turn green. That's the whole mechanism. That's it. But here's the thing. The pipeline had been driving a hiring plan. It had been driving a cash conversation with the board, and the number underneath it wasn't a forecast. It was a default value with a dollar sign in front of it. He didn't have a forecasting problem. He had a process problem, and the CRM had been printing it in a font that looks like math. Seriously, don't trust a forecast built on activity. So before I start taking your pipeline apart, I want to say one thing because it matters. If you've got 41 opportunities in there to be wrong about, you've already done the work. You know who you sell to. You've built a motion that creates real sales conversations. That's months of hard building, and most companies never get this far. This week is the third piece. It is not a grade on your first two. Okay, here's where we are. Forecastio's 2026 benchmarks put lagging organizations under 50% forecast accuracy. Under 50. You could even flip a coin rather than looking at your forecast. And the three drivers, they name CRM, data quality, deal slippage, and pipeline stage inconsistency. All three, let me say this again. The three drivers they name are CRM data quality, deal slippage, and pipeline stage inconsistency. All three of those are structural. Not one of them is effort. Penowitz has case data from the same year. B2B tech companies routinely running 25 to 30% forecast variance every quarter, traced back to segment data being wrong or missing on close to half of open opportunities. They standardize it. Variance dropped under 10% after standardizing within 3 quarters. That's not a heroic turnaround. That's a definition applied consistently. So here's what I need you to hear. Nobody on your team is lying to you. There's nothing for them to be accurate against. You're asking people to hit a target you never described. So the first move, and this is the one that almost everybody skips, is that you map the buyer journey before you ever touch the tool. Most teams do this backwards. They buy HubSpot or Salesforce, they take the stages that come in the box, and they call it a process. It isn't. Those stages came from the software. They did not come from your buyer. And look at what box that was built for. It was built for the medium-sized company. You're not the medium company. That's the reason you're selling a complex enterprise deal in the first place. So here's what you do instead. Take your last 5 closed-won deals and write down how they actually moved. Not how you wish they moved, what actually happened, in what order, and who did it. Then take 5 losses and mark exactly where they died. 2 hours, 1 shared doc, $0. Salesforce's 2026 State of Sales found 46% of sales professionals say data quality issues are actively hurting their sales. That's almost half. And here's the part that's non-negotiable in a complex enterprise sale. Compliance, legal, and finance are their own buyers. They have their own gates. They are not extensions of your champion. If the real journey has a compliance gate and your pipeline has no stage for it, deals will stall somewhere your system structurally cannot see it. RegTech firm I'm thinking of, every deal slowed down after the demo. That was the phrase everybody used. Well, it just turned out to be procurement and risk were engaging weeks earlier than the default stages assumed, which in financial services, RegTech, and other places is completely normal. The gate was always there. The pipeline just had no name for it. Configuring the tool and calling it a process? Seriously, don't do that. Hold that. 30 quick seconds here. Greater Gain Group is our show sponsor. If you're a financial services founder about to hire your first seller, Ask what standard they'll be measured with before you do. If it doesn't exist, they'll miss, and it won't be their fault. Greater Gain Group's built method installs that standard. The I, install, stage definitions, exit criteria, and a forecast built on what buyers actually did instead of what your team sent. Build it before you hire. GreaterGainGroup.com. Back to it. So now we get to the actual swap, and this is the center and focus of the whole episode. I smoke a lot of brisket, and on a brisket, there are exactly two things you can watch: the timer and the thermometer. The timer tells you how long it's been on, and the thermometer tells you where the meat actually is. Only one of those predicts when dinner will be ready. 9 hours in, beautiful bark on the outside of the brisket, thermometer reading 165. You're not even partway done. 203 is done. 165 is just below the middle of the cook. And the bark is what fools you, right? Because the bark looks like progress. Activity data is bark. So do this with me right now. Pull up your stage names and read them out loud. Count how many of them are verbs you performed. Discovery call held, demo completed, proposal sent. Most teams find 4 out of 5. Every one of those describes something you did. Not one of them tells you where the buyer actually is. So let me show you the swap, because I don't want to leave you with the principle and no artifact. Here's a typical 5-stage pipeline, and here's what it becomes. Stage 1 goes from discovery call held to the buyer has named the problem and what it's costing them. Not that you asked, that they answered in numbers. Stage 2 goes from demo completed to buyer has confirmed it's funded for this fiscal year and named who signs. Both halves, funded and who signs. Stage 3 goes from proposal sent to the buyer's technical and security reviewers have engaged you directly. Not that your champion promised to loop them in, that they actually showed up. Stage 4 goes from negotiation to the buyer has walked you through their paper process and given you a start date for legal and procurement. Stage 5 goes from verbal to you have red lines back. Read down that second list. Every single one is something the buyer did that you can point at. That's the thermometer. And here's why it matters. An insurance tech company, 2 deals sitting in demo completed. First one, the carrier's operations lead brought her claims VP to the call unannounced and started asking what a phased rollout looks like. Second one, the champion watched by himself and said he'd socialize it internally. Same stage, identical on the timer. One of those is at 190 and the other one's at 140. And your forecast is weighing them the same. And I want to head off where your brain is going, because every leader goes to the same place. This is not a data entry problem. Adding 3 more required fields won't fix it. The fields aren't complete. They're recording. The fields aren't incomplete. They're actually recording the wrong subject. So once your stages describe buyer behavior, they'll need criteria. Hard ones, both directions. Entry criteria. What has to be true for a deal to enter this stage? Exit criteria. What specific piece of buyer evidence lets it leave? Both written down, both specific enough that somebody who wasn't on the call can check them. Here's how you find out whether you've got that today. Run the 2-person test this week. Take one deal, hand it to 2 people on your team separately. Ask each of them which stage it's in. Different answers, that means you don't have stages. You have opinions with the drop-down attached. It costs you 1 meeting to find out, and I'd rather you find out on a Tuesday than the day before a board meeting. Hold that thought. 30 seconds and we'll be right back. Greater Gain Group is one of our sponsors for the show, and this week's episode is one that we hear a lot. You run an insurance technology company. Real product, real conversations. Your pipeline says $4 million, and you stopped believing it a while back. You just can't exactly say when. That number isn't a lie. It's a reading off an instrument nobody ever calibrated. Your stages record what your team did. The demo, the proposal, the follow-up. Not one of them records what a carrier's risk committee did in response. That's the I in Greater Gain Group's built method, install. We map the real buyer journey against your pipeline, write entry and exit criteria for every stage, and build a forecast tied to what buyers actually did. Then the T, transfer, makes it your team's to run without you in the room. GreaterGainGroup.com. All right, back to the show. Now, same principle runs qualification, and that's where most of your variance is actually born. If you don't know the target you're shooting at, then everything's a target. No written qualification standard means every interested conversation gets to be an opportunity. That's how a pipeline fills up with things that we knew were never going anywhere. The bar isn't we all kind of know. Kind of knowing is a person. You're building a system. Healthcare tech. Company brings in their first real seller. Stages have no exit criteria. And in healthcare, you've got to de-risk security and compliance early because those add months. So that seller discovers the compliance gate one deal at a time over 2 quarters. Every miss gets read as a performance problem. In reality, it never was one. The seller was dropped into a motion that didn't exist yet. Same thing that happens to a first VP of sales, same things that happens to an outside agency. There was nothing there to execute against. So let's talk about forecast categories, and then let's talk about the stall. Most teams have 3 buckets: commit, best case, pipeline. And most teams have never actually defined them, which means they mean something slightly different to every person in the room. Here's what they should mean in evidence terms. Commit is every gate has been identified and every gate has a date. You know the paper process. You know who signs. Nothing left is unknown, only unfinished. Best case is it's real, but at least one gate is still unidentified or undated, usually procurement, sometimes security. Now, the movement triggers both directions, and this is the part almost nobody writes down. Into commit, budget confirmed, signer named, and a date on their calendar for legal or procurement. All 3. Out of commit, any one of those 3 stops being true. Signer changes, date moves and nothing replaces it, or champion goes quiet for 2 weeks. Write both lists. Most teams only ever define the way in, which is exactly why nothing ever comes back out and why every quarter ends in a scramble. And that brings us to the stall. Every biscuit stalls. Temp climbs, gets to about 165, and it just sits there for hours. Doesn't move. And you're trying to get to 203. Now, I've panicked before, cranked the heat, and ruined the brisket. I got tired of waiting and pulled it at 165 and had a brick. But here's the thing about the stall. It's known, it's expected. Anybody who cooks good brisket builds their whole timeline around it. They are not surprised for it. They planned. Your pipeline stalls too. Slow committees, quiet months, deals that go dark and come back. The only question is whether you've built for that or if you're improvising. And here I'm going to be blunt, but hopefully not rude. Ban adjectives from your next forecast meeting, or any forecast meeting for that matter. Still looks good is an adjective. So is strong. So is warm. None of those are things the buyer actually did. Moving a deal between commit and best case on a feeling. So, last thing, and this is one you could do today. Change one question in your deal review. Stop asking, is it still closing? Start asking, what changed? The first one invites reassurance. The second one, it surfaces information. Same room, same people, same 30 minutes, completely different output. One of those questions is asking your team to make you feel better. Still on track, hands you nothing. The champion went dark and the CFO added a security view, hands you something you can act on. Gartner's research, cited through Forecastio's 2026 work mentioned above, shows companies that enable forecast coaching into the sales process improve accuracy by up to 15%. Into the process, not a spreadsheet audit in week 11 when it's already too late to do anything about it. Health tech company, 6 months into the US market, proven motion back home. The founder could not tell you month over month which deals had actually moved and which ones had just aged. Every deal looked the same from the outside because every deal was being measured on how long it had been sitting there. So here's your week in order, and you can run every bit of it without me. First, last 5 wins, last 5 losses, write down how they actually moved and where they died, 2 hours. Second, rewrite your stage definitions against what you find, what the buyer did, not what you did, 1 afternoon. Third, run the 2-person test on a single deal and find out whether those definitions actually hold up. And then in your next deal review, change one question. Stop asking, is it still closing? Start asking, what changed? That's the whole thing. 1 afternoon, 1 meeting, 1 better question. Look, the thing about a stall is it ends. It ends because you built for it, or it ends because you gave up on it. Those look identical on a pipeline report, and they are not the same outcome. A pipeline you can't expect isn't a system. It's a story, and everybody in the room is being polite about it. Good news is it's cheap to fix. Nobody has to buy anything. You just have to write down what real means and then hold a line on it when it's inconvenient. Next week, the deals that look healthy and aren't, and what to build so they stop dying quietly between the conversations. I'm Dan Griffith, and that was Seriously Don't Do That.